Good evening. Welcome to the Education and Pupil Services Committee in-person and virtual meeting for December 21st, 2021. Before we call tonight's meeting to order, Dr. McGarry, would you please outline the public's participation procedures? Thank you.
Yes, Board President Brown. The school district has learned during the pandemic that public engagement now more so than ever is so important. So we are running both a virtual meeting this evening and an in-person meeting. Tonight is a committee meeting, which allows members that are viewing online or those who are in person to ask questions directed to either board, and then the board will direct the administration to answer those questions where we can. They will also become part of the record moving forward. Tonight, if you're in person, you have the opportunity to comment or question before our virtual participants this evening. We ask that you provide your name, your address, and the specific agenda item that you're referring to when you comment or question. And then the board, again, will take that into consideration. And if the board members want to answer the question, obviously, on their own, they will. If they want to direct it to an administrator to answer the question, an administrator will answer the question. Those who are participating live this evening, you can participate one of two ways. You can phone in a comment to 610-789-7200, extension 2000. Again, it's really important you provide your name, your address, and the specific agenda item you'd like to comment on. I do want to say to the viewers that are at home, there are two meetings tonight, Education and Pupil Services, and then there's a meeting, Finance and Operations. You can send in your question to either one of those meetings, hopefully before the close of the evening and before we move forward with any of those agenda items. You can also send your questions or comments into committee meeting questions at upperdarbysd.org. Please provide your name, address, and the specific agenda item you'd like to comment on, and we will definitely take those comments and questions into consideration, both virtually and in person. But as a reminder, those who are in person, go first. If you need me to update anybody, I'm certainly happy to do so.
Thank you, Dr. McGarry. Please feel free to revisit that at your discretion throughout the evening. The meeting of the Education and Pupil Services Committee will please come to order. Roll call, Board Secretary, Mr. Rogers, please.
Dr. Haig?
Present.
Mr. Desnoyers?
Present.
Mr. Warsavage?
Present.
Mr. Neal?
Present.
Ms. Williams?
Present.
Mr. Fields?
Present.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Present.
Mr. Brown?
Present. Thank you, sir. The district posted this evening's agenda to board docs at least 24 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting. Is there a motion to approve that previously posted agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. The agenda has been moved and seconded. Are there any amendments to offer?
There are no amendments.
Thank you. The agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, please signify by saying aye opposed and state your name for the record. Those abstaining, please signify by saying aye abstain and state your name for the record. The motion carries. I will now turn over the Education and Pupil Services Committee agenda to co-chair Mrs. Mitchell.
Thank you, President Brown. How is everyone tonight? Mrs. Kelly, if you could please review the agenda and then just roll into the first agenda item. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight on the Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting, we have three items. The first item is the 22-23 District one-page calendar, which will need board action in January. The second item is the Keystone Exams Winter Administration Window, which is an informational piece. This will not require board action. And the third item is an update on the district's health and safety plan, which would require board action in January at the board meeting. So as we get started, the very first item, like I said, is the 22-23 district calendar, an overview of the one-page calendar. A copy of the entire calendar with the coding and the keys and everything like that is available on board docs, as well as a summary of events. Both are available on board docs for the public and for the board as we're going through this. But throughout this presentation, I highlighted the important district dates as well as the important state testing dates and dates for teachers and parents as they're planning for the 22-23 school year. This is also in accordance to our policy 803, which talks about planning and preparation for the next school year and adhering to all the guidelines that we have for the number of days students attend school as well as the hours that students have to attend school. So beginning in August 23, the 23rd through the 26th of 2022, the teachers would return and begin their professional development. The highlight here would be that first day of school for the students. K through 12 would be returning back to our buildings on Monday, August 29th. We would have a 4-day week there, and it would lead up to Labor Day. And everything that's outlined on the calendar here, like I said, is available on board docs as a calendar, so you can review and follow along. But this calendar mirrors the 21-22 school year. It's almost identical to what we saw this school year. We have 3 professional development days for teachers, one in November, one in February, and one in May. They're full-day professional development days for our for our teachers, and no school for our students would be on those days. The next big one would be June 8th, which is Upper Darby High School's graduation ceremony, and that would be a Thursday, followed by a last day of school for students in grades K through 11 on that Friday, and then the last day for teachers being on Monday, June 12th. So we have reviewed this calendar with principals and the union, and we've received feedback. I made adjustments to that calendar, and this is the days that are very important for entire district days. As we move forward, state testing days, these are the days that are given to us by PDE. They are the windows in which we can state test. So we would be state testing for our Keystone exams during Winter Wave 2, beginning in January, as soon as we return back from a winter break, similar to this school year, which you'll see in the next presentation. And then we would follow in at the end of April for our PSSAs for students in grades 3 through 8. And then following in May, we would be talking about, again, another Keystone exam, Spring Wave, for any students in grades 7 through 12 that are eligible to take those exams. They are end of course exams. And then the last piece are just some additional important days that help with planning. As a parent, you need to know when early dismissals would happen. So we have early dismissals happening monthly, except for the month of January and April. January, the exception there is for the high school because they have final exams there. And April, because of state testing, it makes it a little bit harder to have an early dismissal there. And we have spring break, which would also affect that. So we don't have an early dismissal scheduled there. We have parent conferences again in November, similar to this school year for grades 1 through 8 and also for kindergarten. We also have, of course, winter break scheduled and spring break based on those days. Winter break's a little bit different because of where the holiday falls this year. So the first day off would be the 26th because Saturday is the 24th and the 25th would be on a Sunday. So it makes for a different type of, a start to the break would be on that Monday, the 26th, so it would be the first day off. And then spring break would be following that April date to April 10th of 2023. So that's the conclusion of that presentation. Are there any questions on the district one-page calendar?
Any board members have a question?
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. For teachers at the end of the marking period, so like June 7th is the end of the 4th marking period, are students still able to complete assignments after that date, and teachers are able to get that in, so it's not due in the system for the teacher until afterwards?
Correct.
Okay.
Teachers have a window that they can still enter grades and accept work and everything like that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we can move on to the Keystone exam presentation.
So the next presentation is for the Keystone exams. The Keystone exams, just to refresh everybody's memory, serves for 2 reasons now. Beginning with the class of 2023, it is a graduation requirement per the Act 158. This act came to be, and we did many presentations on it I think 3 to date. So if we need to look back, it happened May of 2019, it happened June of 2020, and then there was also a presentation in December of 2020 that all spoke about how Act 158 was going to be met at our high school. This act also not only is one pathway to demonstrate proficiency on these end-of-course exams, Algebra 1, Bio, or Literature. There are also alternative pathways that can be met through graduation requirements or composite Keystone exam scores. But there's also 3 other pathways. But like I said, we've already looked at all of those. We've already presented those to the public and to the board, and they can be revisited through board docs if need be. The other piece that Keystone Exam serves is the grade 11 accountability, and they're the pieces that get reported out through the Future Ready PA Index and pieces like that. Again, something that we review each year, but remember, the Keystone exams do serve 2 purposes now, one being that graduation requirement, and the one that we are used to seeing is that grade 11 accountability. So as I move forward, similar to our assessment window that you just saw for the 22-23 school year, this is our first assessment window for the 21-22 school year. So as soon as we return back from winter break, students are going to be starting to test on Tuesday and Wednesday for Algebra 1. It's an end of the course exam. So if students are enrolled in Algebra 1, they would be required to take this exam. Literature would follow on that Thursday and Friday, and then biology would fall on that Monday and Tuesday. This information has been posted to the website. Mrs. Simone has been reaching out to parents with multiple communication through her Wednesday folder and Schoology just to remind students that testing will begin as soon as we return from break. Also, during these days, the adjustment to the schedule would happen as well. Students would be starting to test at 7:30 in the morning. Other students will return back on campus if they are not in one of these 3 courses at 11 a.m. to begin their schedules. That's to allow for the allotted time that PDE requires for testing in those 3 subject areas. Just some general testing information. Again, everything is available on our website, and like I said, Mrs. Simone has been pushing out information on this as well. Students are not permitted to have electronic devices. They do have to turn those into their teachers. They cannot have their cell phone on, smartwatches, iPods. Their Chromebooks will have to be left in their bag. They cannot have electronic devices at all. They are prohibited by PDE. If there is a violation, then there are steps that we have to take in doing so. We have to report it to the state as they hold all of the rights to those materials. We could have to do school discipline if necessary, depending on how PDE reacts, as well as we would have to say that the test might not be able to be scored, and students may have to retake the test. They are pieces that PDE sets for us as guidelines as we are administering this assessment. The next piece is just if students, if parents would like to exempt their child, these are the guidelines that would have to be followed for exemption. They do have the right for religious purposes to exempt their child. We do have a policy 127, that allows for this to occur also. And there is a confidentiality agreement that parents would have to sign per PDE as well. Permission is then granted after writing a letter to the superintendent for exemption here. So these guidelines, like I said, have been posted. They have not changed from the previous years, and the PSSAs follow the same guidelines. So as students are now getting used to testing from 3rd grade on, these rules follow us along with PSSAs as well as Keystone exams. So at this point, that's the end of this presentation as well. Are there any questions here?
So I wasn't sure whether to ask my question during this presentation or the last one. But
Okay.
It has to do with testing and the fact that with the pandemic, there was a change to the testing, schedule that the PSSA exams, if I'm correct, moved from, which ordinarily would have been last spring, were moved to this fall. Have there been any other pandemic-related changes to testing schedules?
No, not at this point, but you are correct. So during the 2021 school year, they did extend the window, and you could have tested well into this fall. There has not been an extension on this window. So the window that you are seeing is window number 2, where we usually test anyway for Algebra 1, literature, and biology. This is the window that we have to adhere to, and they've shortened the window. So you have 2 days to test algebra, you have 2 days to test literature, you have 2 days to test biology, followed by 3 makeup windows, and they have to be shipped out of your building by a particular date, and then they're done. So they've gone back to adhering to the shortened window that they've established a few years ago.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this question is only somewhat related to the actual scheduling, but I don't actually know the answer. So let's say I'm a 10th grade student now, and last year I took Algebra 1, and I did not pass the Keystone exam, but now it's a graduation requirement. What happens to that student?
You have the ability to retake the assessment if you choose that pathway. So if a student is below basic or basic and chooses to take the Algebra 1 exam because they were not proficient, they can take it and use that as their pathway. They could also graduate on that Act 158 as a composite, so your scores can be bulked or piled together, and you can pass or you can graduate on that pathway. So there's multiple different pathways to allow that, but you are able to retake the exam if necessary.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Mrs. Kelly, I think Mr. Marshallek is doing the next agenda item.
Exactly.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight we're going to take a few minutes to go through our proposed updates to the health and safety plan with respect to masking. Recently there was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision that upheld the masking order by the acting Secretary of Health was not allowed, and we could not have to follow that order and vacate that order on December 10th. What that did was that put the masking back into the hands of school districts. So we'll kind of go through tonight in terms of what we're looking at, current positivity rates, looking at the data we have that we currently review, we make these decisions, and then what our recommendation will be for either the January board meeting or potentially for the January committee meeting, depending upon how the board would like to go. So just a brief overview. Again, December 10th, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did affirm the Commonwealth Court's decision to vacate the acting secretary's order, which again was the masking was required in all public school buildings and on transportation as well, which was a federal order, but it did maintain that order as well. Districts are now in charge of making that determination based upon what they believe is the best course of action for their school districts. And how that works is that will be approved through a board-approved health and safety plan, which we currently have in place. Our current health and safety plan right now still requires masking in K-12 settings for all students and staff, while we're in the high or substantial range of community transmission, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. Now, what's important for the public to know and for the board to know too, the Supreme Court's decision does not change the requirements for school districts or how they respond to COVID in schools. And I'll explain why that's important as well. We talk about masking and what could happen when students do remove their masks when there is a high level of community transmission. So first and foremost, we're still required to report all positive cases on our school property each week. In addition to the number of close contacts, I'll describe what that is also, to the PA Department of Health for current aggregate numbers, but also for case investigation if there is what they call a link between 2 positive cases or more than 2 positive cases in a classroom setting or a school building. A close contact is determined in the K-12 school setting with students when they're correctly wearing a mask and they're less than 3 feet, they're considered a close contact. If students or staff remove their mask, that spacing jumps up to 6 feet. So anything less than 6 feet without a mask will be determined a close contact if they came into contact for more than 15 minutes cumulatively over the course of a 24-hour period of time with a positive case. Where we see that happen the most at our schools is during the lunchroom, in the lunchroom, when students do have their masks removed while they're eating. But in the classroom setting, It applies to students only when they're within 3 to 6 feet and correctly wearing a mask at all times. They're not considered close contact if they're in that space between a positive case. Does not apply to adults, however. Adults are still have to maintain a 6 feet spacing from positive cases, even with or without a mask. Contact tracing, which is taking a lot of time with our school nurses and our principals when there is a positive case in school, and we're seeing a lot of it this week in particular. But this would be where the nurse or the principal or whoever they have assigned in their buildings would be going through and asking the infected student or the teacher in terms of who was within that spacing around them throughout the day. And that's how they would identify close contacts. Depending upon your vaccination status will depend upon the course of action that you have within our school district. If you're unvaccinated, this is how complicated it can get for our principals and our nurses. If you're unvaccinated, you either have to quarantine or participate in our Test to Stay program, which I'll explain as well. Test to Stay is where the close contact, unvaccinated close contact, would test on a periodic, rotation over the course of 10 days, every 2 days, and as long as they have a negative test, they can remain in school and are required to wear a mask at all times throughout the course of the school day. The other option is, if they do not, and again, that's voluntary, the other option would be that they have to quarantine for a period of 10 days without a test, or a period of 7 days with a negative test. They may return on day 8. And again, you can see these numbers and how complicated this can get with students and staff who are unvaccinated. If you're a vaccinated student or staff member, you must wear a mask at all times at indoor settings. You do not need to quarantine, but you must get a negative test result between days 5 and day 7. As long as you meet that requirement, you can return to school and remove your mask if we had a masking optional policy. Currently, we do not, so we still are requiring masks in our school settings. But again, these are the requirements of a school principal and nurse or staff member when a positive case occurs in our school settings. It only gets more complicated when masks are not required or are optional or not being worn during the course of the day. And it gets especially difficult when there's a high level of community transmission, which we're experiencing right now, which we'll go through. 3 to 6 feet is a key element of spacing that's required by or recommended by the CDC, the PA Department of Health. And again, it mirrors the spacing that students will need to have between one another if they're correctly wearing a mask in the school setting. 6 feet, if you remember, has always been that number that people use since the start of the pandemic for social distancing. But again, it's a recommended mitigation strategy when possible. And we know in our school buildings, that's not always possible in some of our school buildings. Even getting 3 feet is not possible in some of our classrooms, some of our hallways, some of our facilities that we have here in Upper Darby School District. District vaccination status. I'm going to caution, when you look at the data, for the student data. But our current percentage of that fully vaccinated staff and students, right now we have about 97% of the almost 800 staff members who responded to our voluntary survey. We have about 1,600 staff members in total, so about half of our staff who responded are pretty much 100% fully vaccinated. Our students are about 10% at this point. And again, I say the word caution when looking at that data point because the pediatric or the H511 vaccine just became available not too long ago. And to become fully vaccinated, you must have 2 doses within a 3-week period of time. And then 2 weeks after your second dose is when you're considered fully vaccinated. So for our young ones who were one of the first people or students to get the vaccine when it first was approved, they're just becoming fully vaccinated right now. So we expect this number to increase once more students do get that or choose to get vaccinated and that time period passes for our students. Our high school numbers and our middle school numbers are roughly about just under 20% at this point in time, so we do want to encourage our older students to go out and get vaccinated as well. But again, we monitor this every week, and we'll have current numbers week by week to see how vaccinated our schools are. And again, it's voluntary for our students and our staff to submit that information. Just to put out there too, we have a lot of sponsored vaccine clinics we did here in the district, with the Delaware County Memorial Hospital, with the county, with Springfield Pharmacy, and most recently with the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania. So we are, putting as much effort as we can into getting our community and our staff and our students vaccinated. But I also want to plug in too, I did this before our last presentation. A lot of the local pharmacies are looking for individuals to come in and get vaccinated. Springfield Pharmacy, Long Lane Pharmacy, Rite Aid, they all have readily available appointments for any one of in our community, students or adults, to come in and get their vaccine or get their booster shot as well. So if you did make it to one of our clinics, you can go to one of the local pharmacies and get the vaccine as well. So communication with schools. We want to make sure our parents and guardians continue to use the symptom screener each school day and communicate with their school nurse and principal if there are any types of symptoms you're seeing at home, any test results, any close contacts, anything you think is relevant for our school that we need to know, please contact your school nurse and your principal. I linked up there is to our site with the symptom screener for parents to use each day if they would like to choose to go through a checklist to monitor the child before they come to school. But again, please notify your school nurse and principal if your child is, in need of any type of support during that time, especially if they're a close contact with someone in the immediate family, because that plays a key role in identifying, you for the Test to Stay program. You would not be eligible for that program if you are a close contact of someone in your household. But also it's important for our school nurse and principal to know to monitor your symptoms over the course of the period of time. And also, if families choose to have their children vaccinated, please notify your school nurse with the dates of your first and second dose so we can keep track of that for our record keeping and our data review for how vaccinated our school district is. Okay, so the data points. I mentioned earlier before about the community transmission rates. So there are two data points that many school districts use to help with their decision making. One is the incidence rates per 100,000, and what that means over the course of the previous 7-day period of time, how often positive COVID cases occurred per 100,000 individuals within that population. So right now in Delaware County, we're 244.7 instances of positive COVID cases per 100,000 individuals in Delaware County. That is extremely high. And if you noticed with the community transmission table, that is noted as a high level of community transmission. It's the highest level you can go in CDC and PA Department's health transmission table. The percent positivity rate is another metric that we look at when making determinations for our course of action in schools. And what that is, that's the percentage of tests that came back positive in that most recent 7-day period. The numbers up there are from December 17th. And again, the numbers I'm reporting you now are much higher than that. On December 17th, 9.6 was the percent positivity rate, which was a substantial level. However, it has adjusted to 11.1%, which was now again, it's high. So both of our metrics are in the highest level of community transmission. So when considering a possible adjustment to our health and safety plan, we would like to look at targeting our incidence rates and or our percent positivity rate to be under 50 per 100,000 for 2 consecutive weeks, and or less than 5% positivity rate for 2 consecutive weeks. Again, these two metrics do go hand in hand, so once we do hit one of the metrics, we will likely hit the other. This also aligns with the transmission table from CDC and the PA Department of Health to bring us down to the moderate level of community transmission if we hit those numbers, moderate to low. We feel like that might be the best time if we do hit those metrics for a period of two weeks in a row, which again will demonstrate over a 14-day period of time, which again is important for how we measure tests, how we measure quarantine time, the way that the virus can potentially be transmitted over that period of time. We believe that 14-day mark, if we're safe and hit it 2 weeks in a row, that might be an opportunity for us to make masking optional in our K-12 settings. And again, we expect by that time too that our vaccination rates will likely improve as well, to have more of our students and our staff vaccinated. But again, when we talk about masking optional at that point in time, that excludes the Test to Stay program. So if you still are participating in the Test to Stay program, you must wear a mask during the duration of that program. And also, if you are a close contact and you're vaccinated, you still are required to wear a mask during the course of your close contact period until you have a positive or a negative test between day 5 and day 7. So those are the two nuances to the masking optional potential recommendation. So the next steps, we have, again, board meeting coming up early January. We can prepare the adjustment in the language in the health and safety plan to reflect what we just described for the masking optional based on those 2 data points. Or we can continue to watch the data and the levels of community transmission and potentially make a switch to what type of data we want to use to measure our decision making. But again, we have to make a decision at some point in time through our health and safety plan. My recommendation would be to go with the early January board meeting to put in the language we just described in the presentation. But if the board would like us to continue to monitor data, we're happy to do that as well. Bring it back to the January committee meeting and vote on it that night if we choose. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Marshak. And I know you've mentioned that this is taking up so much of our nurses' time and our staff time, and I know for sure that's true, and we so appreciate the work that they're doing and that you're doing. I first wanted to ask a clarifying question. You said you've got the incidence rate and the positivity rate, you've got this and I'm not totally sure. It sounds like are you saying you're still working on that, whether it should be and or where are we on that?
So it'll give us the flexibility to look at either one. Typically, like I said, in most cases, one does not drop without the other. But if there's an example where if we have, let's say, 5.5% positivity rate and we have 48 individuals per 100,000, we may want to make that recommendation to then monitor that for 2 weeks. If we stay there for 2 weeks, make the recommendation to go masking optional at that time.
If I can just add to that as well, Mr. Marshak, right now we're relying on the dashboard that's provided. Prior to the opening of the school year, as everybody knows, we were partnering with Chester County Health Department. School districts had more intimate data localized to your communities and your school districts. We don't have that access to that data any longer, but we could be moving in a direction that when the local health department in the county gets up and running, there is consideration that they be able to get access to that kind of data and provide us that data more localized. So right now we're looking at a county, much larger scale. If there's an opportunity to look more closely at our own data, this would provide us that flexibility too, to look at actual community transmission and positivity rates within our Upper Darby School District.
Okay, so you're saying we have two options as of right now to make this decision by the January voting meeting or to discuss it more at the January committee meeting. I guess I'm just not quite sure what, am I hearing you say that you want us to vote on whether to allow, whether to switch to, I guess I'm not totally clear what the decision is at either of those 2 meetings.
So the health and safety plan has to be board approved, right? And this is going to be a major shift in our health and safety plan.
What's the shift? Because is this not more or less what we have right now? I know.
So it is, and what I mean by that is because we've been under a mask order for so long, and I think, and it's also a hot button topic right now that we want to make sure we're clear and we're open and transparent about what we're doing, and we have the data to back our decision making as well.
Okay, so sort of like a reinforcement, if you will. Is that?
It's a reinforcement, but it's also a conversation. Earlier there were conversations about, the Secretary of making this, and the court ruling wasn't that they didn't have the authority to do it. It was the avenue and how improper it was by going about it. So it really comes down to, school districts are now left in muddling through these decisions, and by muddling through these decisions, we're talking about with the board and the public, hey, the administration feels that we should keep masking. And I know that's a controversial conversation, but as Ed really pointed out earlier, social distancing, staffing, contact tracing, they are still very much a part of what we're dealing with every day. So for the public to remind everybody of the data points and the values that are out there, we're saying, look, our recommendation is if the board wants us to consider to move out of masking, here are those data points again that we would like to consider. To be clear, we don't want to make the vaccination process the number one priority given the percentages of where we are. We would hope that by going down below 5% and the number of incidents below 100, that would speak to less spread, hopefully higher vaccination rates, all working in tandem, and the focus on vaccination of our students in our community is just happening by the very nature of naturally occurring versus making that data point the number one priority. So we're actually, to your point, we do have in our current health plan that Ed had put together the opportunity to kind of use these data points to come out of masking anyway, but we feel like to be very specific about the number of cases under 100,000, where earlier I think we simply had being in low for a 2-week period of time.
Okay.
We're really trying to articulate the specific data points. So if anybody asks, well, what is it, Dr. McGarry? Is it one or the other? What number is it? What percentage it is? We're trying to be clear. And if it requires more conversation to your other question, we're willing to have other questions about this coming out of winter break because our current health plan already says we can keep masking. We're simply having this conversation so that the public and the school board know that we're aware of it. We're aware of the masking order and the conversations that I've had. We know that we've been having these conversations throughout October and November with all of our home and school associations. So it's just another opportunity to engage. But very good questions. It's kind of in our health plan now.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I just wanted to say a little bit more just to sort of comment on the sort of sensitivity of this topic and remark on the fact that I have 2 first graders at Westbrook Park, and any parent of twins will tell you twins are really no more alike than any other siblings that you have. But I'm incredibly lucky that they're both, they could care less about masks. I mean, most of the time they come home and I sort of have to remind them, hey, you're home, you can take your mask off. But I get, as parents know, kids are all different. And I've had those battles with kids about brushing teeth and cleaning up toys and going to bed. So I just want to make clear that we certainly, but I think I also speak for a lot of members of the board, certainly sympathize with any parent that's having a kind of a battle with their kids about masks. These battles are incredibly frustrating and draining, and so I really have a lot of sympathy for any parent going through that. But I also see how, and I see how we're all very exhausted and frustrated with sort of shifting guidance and new variants and new data, and it's all so exhausting. But it makes me think so much of like my grandparents' generation, right? The greatest generation that fought World War II and had meatless Mondays and wheatless Wednesdays and victory gardens. And my grandmother was not Rosie the Riveter. She was Irene the Inspector. She was actually a school teacher, but during the war she was an inspector for Boeing, which is something I'm certain she never expected to do. But my point is, when we had this sort of very visible enemy, everyone came together and there was so much sacrifice. And I just think we still are those people, right? We're still people are still capable of so much sacrifice. And I think the fact that we don't have, that the enemy is this invisible thing makes it harder. But I just want to, I really want to thank everyone who is cooperating, thank all the parents and the community members and the staff and everyone who's really pulling together through all this, and just ask, to just keep it going, exactly, that we are in this together, we are making these sacrifices, it stinks, but we've got to keep doing it because we're saving lives. And as annoying as it is right now to wear a mask, it feels like a very small price to pay, and I'm willing to pay it, and I hope all the other parents will jump in and keep fighting those battles. Again, I can't say enough about how much I appreciate all the effort that community members, and also especially that our staff, our nurses, our teachers, and our administrators are putting into all of this. So thank you.
Just to comment on Meredith's remarks, that they were breathtaking. It took the word, I'm normally very, very eloquent, but that just took the words right out of my mouth, and it spoke for so many of us, so thank you for that. The only 2 super quick questions that I had were, in terms of those data points and those goals that we want to reach so that masking can be optional. In your review of historical data, has there ever been a past point of reference where we have been able to attain those goals, looking back on that for that kind of period of time in consideration of different variances of the disease? I guess I'll stop there with that question.
I think coming out of last school year, when vaccinations became more, available for everyone to achieve, right about that April, May, June, right before the Delta variant came out, we were hitting way below this, in fact. We were way below this. I want to say roughly, if I remember correctly, about 1% positivity rate in our PCR tests, and then less than, I think, 10 per 100,000 for a period of time. And again, that was right around the same time when we did relax the masking across the state. But then quickly it came back, because of the Delta variant, and we kept seeing rising cases the month of July, and then August, and then September. Here we are again. But it was quite low at that time.
So it's definitely an attainable goal, in other words,
Correct.
that we can work towards. Awesome. And the second question that I had was, you had mentioned all of the different contact tracing that has to be done and how time-consuming that is. Again, looking at that data historically, most recently, are you able to tell us in the community where a lot of that transmission tends to happen so that we can be a little bit more cognizant of staying away from, or at least be making considerations of certain things as we engage this holiday season?
That's a tough question. I mean, a lot of the transmission is not really happening within our schools. We're finding a lot of students are becoming positive over the weekend or on a Thursday, and they're notifying us, on, let's say, a Monday when we come to school. We can't say for certain that it's not happening in our schools. We know that for sure there are linked cases within some of our classrooms. That has occurred a number of different times in some of our elementary buildings in particular, and one of our middle schools in particular, when there is less than 3 feet, when students are identified as close contacts. We also know that our students, and for our students who are watching tonight and our parents, you have to wear your mask correctly. So just having it around your mouth, I know I get made fun of a lot for wearing my mask wrong, which I don't, but they think I do. But if it's not covering your nose and your mouth, it's not being worn correctly. And by the rule of the quarantine or close contact, if you don't wear it correctly and you are within 3 to 6 feet, you should quarantine because you're considered close contact. You're not wearing your mask the right way. So those are important pieces, to have it over your nose, over your mouth, when you're in our schools. But we know for sure it's happening, and right this week it's happening, it seems like everywhere. It seems like it's been a tough week this week.
Thank you.
I just want to get some clarification, and it's more going to be me providing it, but the December 10th decision that came down from the Supreme Court affirming the Commonwealth Court's decision to vacate the acting secretary's masking order came down to not that masking was illegal, but the order itself that came from the acting secretary of health. So Kyle, if you could, is masking illegal in schools?
No, masking is not illegal in schools. As a matter of fact, you're correct that what the courts ended up saying was simply that the process that was used by the secretary was improper. But in fact, even the secretary could have exerted that authority if she had used the processes that are actually built into the law to be able to do so.
All right, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to get that clarification out there for the public. The second point I just wanted to mention was the infection rate. So as of right now, what the infection rate is basically how many people you would transmit it to if you were infected. And there are 67 counties in Pennsylvania, 1, 2, and 3, Philadelphia, Delaware County, Chester County, followed right up with 7 and 8, I believe, Bucks and Montgomery County. So we see that most of the population in Pennsylvania is in the southeast corner. And obviously, we're going to be infecting more people because we have a lot more close contacts. We live closer together. So I think it's really important that I think we stay tied to community data. I know, Dan, you had mentioned, or Dr. McGarry, I apologize. Dr. McGarry, you had mentioned more community-based data once a Department of Health goes forward and is providing that information. I think many of our staff come from out of the community, and I think having that sense of where the community is at the county level can help guide us in a better way than just the community data itself. Because we could have someone coming in from a community that has a high transmission rate, there's an outbreak there, but they're coming into our schools now and infecting our children. So I want to get more of a not a global, but a larger picture than just our school district. And our school district's pretty compact compared to some school districts in Pennsylvania, so.
Yeah, and that's a fair conversation, but it's also important, that there are local decisions that are made and local review of information, especially during the school year, as far as, if the community transmission rates in Upper Darby are low, and it's in our community, whereas other communities during certain holidays or certain times are traveling and going different places, but ours remain low. As Upper Darby's actually, in some periods of time in 2020, we were lower than surrounding areas. That would provide us some different freedoms with our kids and our community as well. So if we can get our hands on that data, it might allow us to have different social and emotional opportunities, different learning activities. So it's a combination of working with localized data and data beyond our schools, because we're going to get questioned without a doubt by families and by communities about why one community is doing something and why you're not doing something. And we're ready to have those conversations. We have obviously a lot of data to review. We just want to make sure that we're looking at our community, the social and emotional needs of our community and our staff, and talking about that. We also know that in meeting with the medical professionals, whose name I'm not going to put out there because it's unfair to them, they volunteer to meet with superintendents, they've made it clear to us too, as just as recently as today, do not close schools right now. Keep going. Keep your mitigation strategies in play. Keep pushing through. You're doing a great job. Schools are doing a better job than just about everybody, and the focus is on keeping kids in school. And that really is why we're trying to use this data localized, and to your point, David, on a state and county level. We'll certainly do all of those things.
Thank you guys for the presentation. I have a question about communication with schools. Please notify your school nurse once your child is received, et cetera, et cetera. Is this the only way the parents, no. Is this the only way the school knows whether a child is vaccinated or not? And is that where we're getting our 10% number from? Is that how we're determining 10% of the kids being vaccinated?
So right now, we are relying on families to voluntarily, give that information to us. We can also get it when a student is identified as a close contact, and a parent does say they're vaccinated. We can ask that at that point in time. If we didn't know at that point, we would know then. There is something the nurses do have access to called the PA-CIS, which is a database for all the immunizations across the Commonwealth. But again, you're looking for a specific student. So that also relies based on how quickly the vaccinator enters that data as well. But we want to encourage our families to, grassroots effort, kind of let us know, and then we can track it. At this point, obviously, it's not required by any, authority, but we're asking families to cooperate with that.
Okay, so, is it possible that there's more people? There's more kids vaccinated? Is it possible that number is higher? We just don't know because we haven't been notified?
It's certainly possible, and if we keep in mind, too, we just started really pushing for this information over the past week.
Okay.
So once we're going to continue to do that as well, pushing it out with the principals, pushing it out with our nurses. And we've gotten a pretty decent, within that first day after that parent list went out, a number of emails came flooding in with dates, and so we expect it to continue to increase.
Okay.
But we certainly think there is a higher percentage of students who are fully vaccinated at this time.
Okay, I'm trying to remember I can't remember if I filled out a form for my work or for the school as to vaccination status. I know how to do it for my work.
Yeah.
I think we had one for the district.
So Don, you're right. I mean, I think right now we're focused on 5-year-olds and older. Going into the school year, Ed, we did put out in our communication updating the nurses' forms coming in. Remember, at that time, coming into the school year, it was only secondary age students. So this data right now is taking into consideration population where the 5 and older is so new, and we just held a vaccination clinic yesterday where over 300 students were vaccinated, thanks to Ed Marshallak and Children's Hospital and the team that worked with Ed to pull that off. But I think this percentage is also based on compliance with giving us the information, and really those cards that were coming in. We did ask for that information this summer, correct, going into the school year?
Yes, we added part of our student information cards that came in, but again, we're relying on
Parent input. family?
data,
input?
putting it on there,
Yep.
willing to put it on, being willing to put it on there, and, but, yeah, so, again, we're gonna keep pushing our families to, and put out there again, we want them to let us know when and if we, they do choose to get vaccinated, to let
Sure
us
thing.
know.
Yeah, parents, please let us know.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
On the data points, is this the bottom 2 points, is this a if, then, target incidence, so on the data point slide, I just want to know if is that an if, then? Like, so if we're at 5%, then we're going to optional, masking optional.
Right, so it'd be, exactly, if we hit that data point, or the data points 2 consecutive weeks, then we would have masking optional in our school district K to 12, with the
Okay.
exceptions of test to stay and quarantine for vaccinated folks.
Okay, and the last time we did that was end of the school year last year, right before the summer started, before the Delta.
For a very short period of time, we
Very
had
short period.
masking optional, yeah,
Yeah,
in our
okay.
ESY program and summer programming. Yep.
Okay. I want to say, so thanks for answering my questions. Thank you for going above and beyond with this, and like Irene, the inspector, you've all had to do a lot of work, really outside of your scope of practice. Really, probably not what you signed up for, and a lot of people are saying that, so I really appreciate that. Like vaccine clinics that Dr. McGarry just mentioned, and it's really, it hasn't been just the kids, like from the beginning, we've been, this district, these Upper Darby School District employees have been trying to get this community vaccinated as best they can, so it's your efforts, it's everybody here's efforts, and it's really appreciated. So, I'm done.
I just wanted to just make one concern, I have one concern, and that is really on our staff, our nursing staff and our principals who are doing the test to stay and the contact tracing and everything. If things do not go down over the holidays, do we have any plans to help support the staff in the beginning of the year when we could be seeing a lot more kids in the test to stay program on top of all the other medical issues that nurses deal with every day and collecting the data on if kids got vaccinated and all those things? Is there any plans? I know everyone needs a break over the break, but are we thinking ahead at all about what we would do if positivity rates increased over winter break?
So right now, we currently do have extra support in all of our buildings through some agency nurses who do come help, and this was put in place last school year, and we continue it this school year as well. But again, we're pushing to have more people come in and help our nurses. We're trying to schedule them as best they can. They also have schedules, the nurses who might conflict with their ability to come into work, or if they're a close contact, so we're working through with our agencies to do that. But we were thinking of that. We knew this was going to be difficult with kids back in full-time and how the Delta variant was kind of taking over the incidence rate. We did expect this to happen, and that's why we put in those extra supports. But we do need more. We do need more for sure, so we're looking at filling those spots as fast as we can.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who is going through these challenging times on the ground. Any other comments or questions from board members about this agenda item? Okay, so I think at this time we'll move into public comment. Are there any public comments in the boardroom on any one of these agenda items?
Thank you. Savan Jalosian, 1144 Myrtlewood Avenue. I am here this evening to bring attention to the fact that the same CDC guideline data guidance monitoring system dashboard that the school board and administration are using is the same data used by neighboring Delaware County school districts, where current masking is masking optional / recommended and is not required and enforced. Specifically, these school districts are Ridley, Springfield, Marple Newtown, Wallingford, Swarthmore, and Pendelco. The same CDC weekly data that is found on the dashboard that Mr. Marshalik presented, today's data was 244 per 100,000 is deemed high. The percentage of positivity of 11% is considered high as well. This data is made available to all of my previously mentioned school districts. They are using the same data. The data is not being manipulated. They're in the same county as us, but yet these school districts are mask optional. and Upper Darby School District is not. To the best of my knowledge, these school districts have not implemented target incident rates for masking requirements. And this is why I'm here today, to voice my concerns and my requests to make Upper Darby School District masking optional, and to make it now. Not at the next school board meeting, not on January 17th, but today. Masking is not a one policy fit all. Masking a healthy child is inhumane. Masking a healthy child is cruel, and it makes them suffer. Our children have suffered too much for too long. Masking a healthy child goes against every basic right. It goes against every right of the parents that this school board and that this administration has taken away from me. You have failed to give me the option. You have failed to give me the choice. You have failed to allow me to make decisions for my child. Masking should not be dependent on vaccination rates, and it should not be dependent on target incident rates. In addition to this, and equally important, is that masking is disruptive and highly detrimental to a child's learning. We can't even say that our children are developing minimal linguistic skills. They're not developing these skills. Our children are visual learners. They are in a monkey see, monkey do environment. They can't see the mouths of their teachers. They can't see how to pronounce words to increase their vocabulary. How can the school board and this administration approve social media posts showing our precious children being masked, learning their alphabets and their vocabulary? So again, I hope you take my comments into consideration, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell, I just would like to respond to part of that comment, because I work for Wallingford-Swarthmore School District, and I know the solicitor of Wallingford-Swarthmore School District is our solicitor. Wallingford-Swarthmore School District does have targeted incidence rates, so on December 7th, January 7th, 14th, or sometime in January, February, it will become mask optional based on the number of cases that are going on. So on those targeted incidence rates, if it does not match up, masking will still be required in that district.
According to their
Health and
website,
safety plan that was passed in December.
I read optional.
Yes,
this evening.
if it meets the requirements of the incidence rates.
I read masking recommended.
No.
Okay. Well, I misread then.
Dr. McGarry?
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, this is going to be another conversation, and I appreciate your comments, and certainly as a parent, you're concerned. Dr. Haig had mentioned earlier, for everybody, there's social and emotional concerns that are there. We stand behind our social media commentary and our posts that go out there. We're getting information from some pretty well-trained professionals, medical professionals, who are giving us this advice. Look, I mean, for whatever it's worth, it's become a politicized conversation. You know, our job is to put the information that we have in front of us with people that we trust to make decisions for kids. Our number one priority has always been, and will continue to be, keep kids in school the safest way possible. It's not really a debate over whether we think the masks work or forcing a vaccination on anybody. It's really, these are the rules of engagement that provide us the best opportunity to keep teachers in front of children in our schools every single day. I would like to reiterate that there are a lot more school districts in Delaware County who are remaining not masking, just like Upper Darby School District is, just across Route 1, up the pike toward Glen Mills, an intermediate unit that's local. There are a lot of other school districts that are taking the medical advice that we receive, the facts that are in front of us, and making those decisions. Could be that in some of those other surrounding school districts, they have 80 to 90% vaccination status among their kids, and they feel like they can move in that direction. We're a much larger school district. We are far more complicated, and we have spacing issues that add to this. We're not being left without contact tracing. Our nurses are overwhelmed. Staffing of our schools, we have a high number of parents that are going out that have children that are becoming COVID positive in other school communities. There's a lot that goes into this. I don't want to discredit your personal beliefs about that, but these are the rules of engagement. And we are going to put our best foot forward to support you, to support our kids, but also to keep our schools open for in-person instruction. And I think sooner than later, we are going to see ourselves in a different place. We've had conversations that hopefully we can get through January and probably into February. That's why other school districts are looking at that time frame, because we're hearing from the projections from these medical experts that it could be a better place once we get through winter break. So that is our process. We agree there's a social and emotional aspect to some of these for some of our kids. That's not lost on us when we make these decisions. Believe me, many of us have our own kids. We understand where that is. But we've got to continue to move forward, as Dr. Heggs reiterated today, together, and keep moving in that direction. And that's our game plan, and we're going to keep doing that.
My emphasis was masking a healthy child specifically. That is my area of concern, you know. That's why I'm asking for masking optional. And the same rules apply if I was sick at work. I should stay home. If a child is sick, they can stay home. If they would like to mask, I respect the decision of that parent, of that guardian. They can mask. But my emphasis was on masking a healthy child. So, thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Are there any online?
It's Ilona Shabani, 290 Childs Avenue, Drexel Hill, PA. It was received on 12/20, December 20th. Item number 3. The Supreme Court's decision on ruling out the mask mandate does not affect Upper Darby School District, UDSD, question mark. In UDSD, Upper Darby School District above the PA, is Upper Darby School District above the PA Supreme Court. UDSD is an entity under the Commonwealth of PA. You get federal and state funding. You do not lose any funding if you make masking optional. Marple Newtown School District, Springfield, Ridley are all mask optional. Did the virus stop working at these areas? You're opening yourselves up for lawsuits because you're enforcing something illegal. Masks do not work. It has been proven that masks cause more harm than good. It started with 2 weeks to slow the spread. Now it's about to be 2 years. Let the kids breathe, please. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I think we should review the agenda and see what the consensus is from the board on the 2 action items.
The first item on the agenda for this evening was the 22-23 District one-page calendar, which would require board action at the January 11th, 2022 board meeting.
Is everyone okay with moving that forward to the January meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, great. And
The second item was informational about the Keystone exams. And then the third item is the district's health and safety plan, which would require board action at the January 11th, 2022 board meeting as well.
okay, is the board comfortable with moving forward a targeted instance rate at the January meeting to try to see where we can go mask optional?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes? All right, it looks like we have consensus for that. And that, at this time, I'm going to turn the agenda back over to President Brown.
Okay, thank you. A motion is in order for the adjournment of the Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.